Hello, today I want to share with you a few tips that will help you excel in geography, both paper 1 and paper 2. Number 1, negative answers do not score in geography. What do I mean? For example, you are told to explain the challenges facing mining in Kenya. You find someone writing lack of capital. That is a negative answer. It will score 0. Instead, what are you supposed to write? Inadequate capital. Avoid so much the use of negative phrases. You find a student writing, Kenya does not have modern technology. Do not tell us what it does not have. Say what it has. If it was a challenge, say Kenya has less developed technology or less advanced technology. So do not use the word in a negative way because you will not score. You will not score. Number 2, be very careful with questions that require you to use the word some. This is a tricky part and I think most students miss their marks here. For example, you are told, explain the significance of rocks. And then a student writes, rocks are sources of building materials. That is a wrong answer. You know why? Not all rocks can be used for building. So such a question requires you to use the word some. Some rocks are sources of building materials. Other questions that require you to use the word some include significance of rivers, because all rivers do not serve the same purpose. We also have significance of lakes. We have adaptation of vegetation. For example, the desert vegetation, it has different adaptations. So you use the word some and you be very careful. That part makes so many students lose marks. Number 3, when you're told to define a word, do not repeat the word you're supposed to define in your answer. For example, define international trade. Some students start with international trade that is wrong. Do not repeat that word. What are you supposed to write instead? What is international trade? It is the exchange of goods and services between 2 or more countries. So avoid repeating the word that you're supposed to define. Okay? When a question requires you to explain problems, always remember problems are explained by their consequences. If you do not mention the consequence, you will not score. For example, explain the problems facing urban areas. The problems facing urban areas. So you give the problem, and because you have been told to explain, you must mention the consequence. One problem, for example, is a high rate of unemployment. What is the consequence? It leads to increased social crimes. Another problem may be overpopulation. What is the consequence? Leading to inadequate social amenities. So be very careful on that. A problem and a consequence. When a question requires you to explain a condition, remember, a condition is always explained with its benefit or by its benefit. For example, explain the conditions necessary while citing a hydroelectric power station. You can give an example like presence of hard basement rocks. That is a condition. They must be there. Hard basement rocks. But what is the benefit? To provide a firm foundation for construction of the station. So you give a condition and you give the benefit of that condition. Then you will be confident that you have explained. If a question requires you to explain a factor, factors are explained by their purpose. For example, explain the factors favoring growth of maize. One factor is deep soils. What is the purpose? For anchorage. A factor and its purpose. I hope it's clear that when you are explaining, 2 things must be seen. The factor or the condition or the problem And then the other side. I have said if it is a factor, you give its purpose. If it is a condition, you explain by giving its benefit. If it is a problem, the explanation will be the consequence. If you follow that, you are sure to score all the marks. You will score all the marks. Another tip. When you're given a question that requires you to compare, you can give differences or similarities, but never use the word than. For example, differentiate maybe between tourism in Kenya and Switzerland. You find somebody writing that Kenya has a warmer climate than Switzerland. That is wrong. Tell us that Kenya has warm climate throughout the year, while Switzerland has warm summers and cold winters. And still on that note, if you are differentiating between two terms, for example, you've been told to differentiate between domestic tourism and international tourism, it is very important to include that word while. The two definitions must be correct for you to score, and then that word while must be present. It must be present. So you define domestic tourism correctly, then you say while international trade is, and then you will be able now to score. If a question requires you to maybe mention, or if the question requires an answer that has pests or diseases, you must give an example for you to score. For example, you're explaining problems facing maybe sugarcane farming in Kenya, and you want to give a diseases as one of the problems. You must mention an example of a disease. If you just say pests and diseases, you will not score. You must give examples. I hope it is clear. If you have any question that requires you to calculate, that is to determine mathematically, remember to include the units. Remember to include the units. If it is centimeters, degrees, all those, include them. If you are told to give the significance of something, you give both positive and negative points. If the question requires the importance, then you're going to give only the positive. Mostly we get questions on significance of, for example, paper 2, economic activities. And one main common thing, a positive one, is something to do with foreign exchange. And I want to remind you that we do not say that it brings foreign exchange. It is wrong. I just want to remind you that foreign exchange is earned. I have put that because it cuts across many economic activities when you are maybe explaining the significance. Another thing, still on significance, and let me dwell with paper 2 first. Every economic activity has significance, of course. And sometimes students think they are the same. Let me give, for example, this positive one, creation of employment. Fishing will create employment. Tea farming will create employment. Mining will create employment. Industrialization will create employment. So how are we going to differentiate when you are writing that answer? For example, being told to give the significance of mining. How will I know that you are talking about mining? You be specific. You give an example that is related to mining. So when you say that mining creates employment, for example, we have drivers who are employed to transport the minerals from the mines to the processing factories or something like that. But at least we see, you understand that that employment comes from mining. If it is fishing, the same thing. So you be very specific. You be very specific when you're giving significance. Sometimes we think they're very simple, so we generalize. and then we lose the marks. So another thing that I want us to look at, when you get a question that requires you to label features, and those features have been maybe labeled in that diagram as A, B, C, and you are told to identify them. The first step before you even start writing anything, write A, B, C in the answer sheet so that you can match A with the correct name. Sometimes students just write the answers in no particular order, and then examiners are confused which was A, which was B. Lastly, for today, consider the tenses in your questions. It could be present, past, or future. Make sure you are answering your questions according to the tenses. For example, what has the government done? Explain the measures that the government has taken to improve nomadic pastoralism in Kenya. That is something that is talking about past, something that has already been done. So when you are answering, we expect to see the government has. Then you can be told, what can the government do to ensure the future of international trade? The answers will be, the government can. Okay? Then you might also have a question that is in present. What is the government doing to improve dairy farming in Kenya? What is the government doing? That is current. So the answer will be, the government is, and then you give your points. I wish I could be able to make a longer video. There are so many points that I wanted us to discuss. Please subscribe and like, because I'll be doing a comprehensive video.